When my granddaughter turned 6, I sat by the phone all morning, waiting for the invitation I thought would come. It never did. That same afternoon, I scrolled through Facebook and saw balloons, cake, and smiling faces, my family celebrating without me. I didn't cry. I didn't call. Instead, I walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the deed to the very house they lived in. A week later, on a quiet Sunday lunch, I handed my granddaughter a birthday gift that made her parents go pale. I've lived in the same little town for over 40 years. My name is Margaret, and at 64, I had carved out a quiet, almost invisible life for myself. After my husband passed away 10 years ago, I kept the routines that made sense. Morning walks to the bakery, tending to the roses in my small front yard, and a steady habit of reading before bed. The silence was sometimes comforting, sometimes crushing. But there was one constant joy that brightened everything: my granddaughter, Lily. Lily was 6, full of questions, and had a laugh that could melt the ice of the coldest winter. Her parents, my son Daniel and his wife Rachel, rented the house I owned just a few blocks away. It was supposed to be temporary, something to help them save money, but years had passed and they were still there. I didn't mind. The house was mine, and they needed stability. I was always available when they needed me. If Rachel had a late meeting, I would pick Lily up from school. If Daniel was working weekends, I would keep Lily overnight. I loved being part of her world, attending her school plays, baking her birthday cakes, sewing Halloween costumes. She was my reason to keep going. Sometimes, to make things easier, I stayed over at their place for a few days. You'd think the homeowner might take the guest room or at least a comfortable space, but that wasn't the case. I stayed in the smallest room at the back of the house, a space barely big enough for a twin bed and my suitcase. It was fine, or at least I told myself it was fine. It was convenient for Lily, and that was all that mattered. Rachel was always polite, in that distant, curated kind of way. She had a talent for making every suggestion sound like a rule. "Oh, Margaret, we try to keep the kitchen clear after 8 p.m. It just helps the routine." Or, "Before buying toys for Lily, could you run it by me first? We're trying to keep her room decluttered." I agreed every time, smiling, brushing off the sting of feeling like a visitor in a house that legally belonged to me. Daniel, my son, was quieter. He would shrug when I brought it up, saying, "Mom, Rachel just likes things tidy. Don't take it personally." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to think that the distance I felt was just my imagination, or perhaps my sensitivity as I got older. People get busy, I told myself. They don't mean to make me feel like an outsider. One evening, Rachel invited her parents over for dinner. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread. I came early to help, as I always did, peeling carrots, setting the table, keeping Lily entertained while Rachel finished the cooking. When dinner time came, I expected to join them at the dining table. But as Rachel's parents arrived, Rachel smiled at me and said, "Margaret, would you mind sitting in the living room with Lily? It might be more comfortable for her to eat there while we talk." Her voice was sweet, but my chest tightened. I took my plate and followed Lily to the couch, balancing the dish on my lap as we watched a cartoon she liked. From the dining room, I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations I wasn't a part of. I smiled at Lily as she told me about a classmate who thought unicorns were real. But inside, a small part of me sank. It wasn't just about the seat at the table. It was about what it meant. I was beginning to understand my place in this house. I told myself it was fine, that maybe they needed time with Rachel's parents, that maybe I was imagining the subtle shift in tone, the unspoken suggestion that I belonged in the background. But that night, when I returned to my small room at the back of the house, I noticed how quiet it felt. Too quiet. I tried to push the thoughts away. Lily needed me, and that was enough. I could live with being in the background if it meant being part of her life. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slowly being nudged into a role I hadn't agreed to, a role I wasn't even supposed to play. Lily's 6th birthday was coming up, and I had been planning her gift for weeks. Every year, I tried to make it something special, something she could keep as a memory. This year, I had saved up for a delicate silver necklace with her name engraved on it. It wasn't extravagant, but it was meaningful. I imagined her opening the box, her eyes lighting up, that pure little smile spreading across her face. But as the day approached, something felt off. No one mentioned the party. Not Rachel, not Daniel. There were no calls about helping with decorations, no whispers from Lily about cake flavors or balloons. It was unusual. I tried not to overthink it, convincing myself they were planning a surprise. Rachel could be organized when she wanted to be, and maybe this was one of those times. On the morning of Lily's birthday, I woke up early. I baked a small cake in my kitchen, just in case they wanted to celebrate later. I wrapped the necklace carefully, tying it with a ribbon I had saved from last Christmas. I placed both on my dining table, ready for when they'd call. The hours slipped by. 9 o'clock, noon. By 2 in the afternoon, I started checking my phone more frequently, sure that I must have missed a text. I refreshed my messages, checked for voicemails. Nothing. I sat in my chair, the necklace box still beside me, the cake untouched. Around 3, I gave in to curiosity and opened Facebook. The first thing that popped up was a photo. Lily in a sparkly pink dress, standing in front of a 3-tiered cake covered in unicorn decorations. Behind her were Rachel's parents. Daniel, a cluster of smiling children, and balloons filling the living room. I stared at the photo for a long time, my chest tight. I clicked through the album. There was a video of everyone singing Happy Birthday, another of Lily blowing out her candles, a few shots of Rachel laughing with her friends. I wasn't in any of them. I wasn't there at all. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. They had planned a birthday party for my granddaughter and hadn't invited me. I set my phone down and sat in silence. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling slightly. A dull ache spread through my chest, not the sharp sting of anger, but the heavy weight of being excluded, of knowing it was intentional. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm. It wouldn't help to overreact. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. I picked up my phone again and sent Daniel a short text. I hope Lily's having a wonderful birthday. Should I come by later to give her my present? The reply came minutes later. Mom, don't be upset. Today's just a small party with Rachel's family. We can plan something with you later this week. I read it twice. Don't be upset. As if the problem was my reaction, not their choice. As if being left out was something I shouldn't mind. My breath caught in my throat. I put the phone down again, my fingers curling into my palms. I tried to focus on something else. The flowers outside my window, the smell of the cake cooling on the counter. But the images I had just seen kept replaying in my mind. Lily laughing, Rachel smiling, everyone there but me. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my friend Linda. She had been at the party with her granddaughter, one of Lily's classmates. She sent a picture, Rachel leaning over to speak to someone, her expression relaxed, almost smug. Underneath the picture, Linda had written, "Not sure if you want to see this, but I thought you should know what was being said." I hesitated, then opened the voice note attached. Rachel's voice floated through, clear and casual. I just didn't want the whole event to be overshadowed by certain presences. Sometimes it's easier to keep things simple. There was a small laugh from someone else. Then the recording ended. I didn't need Linda to explain who Rachel was talking about. I set the phone down, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just about the party. This was a pattern. Small exclusions that didn't look like much from the outside, but added up to a bigger picture. I was being pushed to the sidelines. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. Part of me wanted to cry, but I didn't. I'd learned long ago that tears never changed anyone's mind. Instead, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of a cake that wouldn't be eaten, a necklace that wouldn't be opened, at least not today. I told myself to breathe again, But the ache didn't go away. It deepened. And yet, somewhere beneath the hurt, something else began to stir. For the next few days, I kept my distance. I didn't call Daniel or Rachel. I didn't stop by their house. I told myself I needed space, but in truth, I needed clarity. It's one thing to feel hurt. It's another to understand why. I started with small steps. A casual chat with my neighbor, Mrs. Turner, who had a habit of noticing everything that went on in the neighborhood. "I didn't see you at Lily's party," she said one morning as she watered her roses. "No, I wasn't invited," I replied, forcing a smile. Mrs. Turner frowned, setting down her watering can. "That's surprising. I've overheard Rachel a few times, you know. She's mentioned that you staying over can sometimes be inconvenient. Something about how it feels like having a guest all the time." Her words landed like pebbles hitting water, small at first, then rippling outward. "Inconvenient," I repeated softly, the taste of the word bitter in my mouth. That night, I sat in my chair and tried to convince myself that maybe Rachel had just been stressed. Maybe she had vented without meaning anything by it. But then, the twist came. A few evenings later, I stopped by the house to drop off a bag of Lily's favorite cookies. As I stepped up to the porch, I heard Daniel's voice through the slightly open window of the living room. His tone was low, serious. "I just think we need to find a way to, arrange things so Mom doesn't stay over as much. It's just too much sometimes." Rachel's voice was softer, but I could still hear it. "Exactly. We need space. I don't want her feeling like she can just be here anytime she wants." I froze on the porch, my hand still holding the cookie bag. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Arrange things. Find a way. I stepped back quietly, leaving the cookies by the door. My chest felt hollow as I walked away. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It was deliberate. The hope I'd been clinging to, the hope that this was all some accident or oversight, began to crumble. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Daniel's voice, the way he spoke as if I were a problem to solve. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the years I'd supported him, the late nights, the loans, the way I'd always stepped in to help when he needed me. By morning, the ache in my chest had hardened into something else. Resolve. I pulled out my file box, the one where I kept all important documents. I flipped through until I found the deed to the house. My name, clear and undisputed. The property taxes I had been paying every year. I sat there for a long moment, just looking at it. Rachel and Daniel weren't just living in my house, they were depending on it. The next twist came unexpectedly. Later that week, I had lunch with my friend Linda. Yes, the same Linda who had sent me the message from the party. Linda's husband was a lawyer, and she knew more than most about property matters. Over coffee, Linda leaned in. "Margaret, I probably shouldn't even mention this, but Rachel asked me something strange the other day. She wanted to know how it works if a house is sold while family is living in it. Specifically, she asked about buying a house from a relative." I blinked at her, my hands tightening around my coffee cup. "She asked you that?" Linda nodded, her expression uneasy. It sounded calculated, like she was planning something. A cold wave ran through me. Rachel wasn't just complaining about my presence. She was looking for ways to secure the house without me. I felt the pieces sliding into place, every polite suggestion, every quiet exclusion, every carefully chosen word. They weren't just trying to limit my visits. They were trying to shift my position entirely, from owner to outsider, from mother to unwelcome guest. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with the deed spread out on the table. My name, my signature, my house. I traced my fingers over the paper, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I understood now. This wasn't about a birthday party. This wasn't about me being inconvenient. This was about control. And if they thought I was going to quietly fade into the background, they didn't know me as well as they thought they did. In the days after speaking with Linda, the picture in my mind grew sharper. Every small slight, every polite dismissal, it was all part of a larger pattern. Rachel wasn't just trying to make me feel unwelcome. She was methodically shifting the narrative. By painting me as someone just staying over occasionally, she was changing my role in the household. If I was only ever a guest, it would make it easier for them to explain away my absence. It would justify my exclusion. It would make it simpler eventually to separate me from the house. I thought about the dinner with Rachel's parents, the birthday party, the rules about the kitchen. It was all deliberate. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. I had stopped by their place one afternoon when I knew Daniel was at work. I had a bag of groceries. Lily loved my chicken noodle soup, and I wanted to make her some for the week. Rachel wasn't home yet, so I let myself in using the spare key. On the kitchen counter, there was a stack of unopened mail. I meant only to move it aside, but a large envelope caught my eye. It had the return address of a local bank. Without thinking, I flipped it over. The flap wasn't sealed. Inside was a loan application. My name was printed on the property line as the owner. And there, in neat handwriting, were Daniel and Rachel's names as applicants, requesting a home equity loan, using the house as collateral. I felt the blood drain from my face. My fingers gripped the counter as I read the lines over and over, my eyes catching on phrases like pending approval and subject to property owner's consent. They weren't just planning, they were acting. A wave of anger rose, but it was quickly met with something colder. This was my house, my name, my choice. I placed the papers back exactly where I found them. When Rachel came home 20 minutes later, I was at the stove, stirring soup as if nothing had happened. "Margaret, I didn't know you were here," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought Lily might want some soup for the week," I replied calmly. We chatted lightly, but in the back of my mind, my plan was forming. That night, I pulled the deed from my file box again. I studied the legal language, my name, the rights it guaranteed. If they wanted control of the house, they weren't going to get it. Not in the way they imagined. I decided to bypass them entirely. The house would belong to Lily. She was the one I wanted to protect. By putting the property in her name, I could remove Daniel and Rachel from the equation. They could live there for her sake, but the control would be out of their hands. I reached out to a lawyer I trusted, a quiet man named Harris who had helped me with my will years ago. I explained the situation, careful to keep my voice steady. "You can gift the house to your granddaughter," Harris said, after listening. "We can structure it so it's in trust until she's of age. Daniel and Rachel will have no legal claim over it." That was exactly what I wanted. We began the paperwork quietly. I kept everything in a locked drawer at home. I didn't breathe a word to anyone, not Linda, not Mrs. Turner, not even Daniel. Then, just as the documents were nearly ready, Rachel surprised me. One Thursday afternoon she called. Her voice was unusually warm. "Margaret, we're having a family dinner this Sunday. We'd love for you to come. It's been too long." Her tone was smooth, but I'd learned to hear the edges beneath it. I could guess what this was about. "Sure enough," she added lightly, "Daniel and I have been talking about some ideas for the house. We'd love to run them by you. Maybe over dessert?" The pieces fell into place. This wasn't a dinner for me. It was a setup. They wanted me relaxed, comfortable, and ready to sign something. I smiled into the phone, though she couldn't see me. "That sounds lovely, Rachel. I'll be there." She seemed pleased. "Wonderful. We'll see you then." As I hung up, I looked over at the neatly stacked documents on my desk. I would attend the dinner, but I wouldn't be signing anything they brought. I already had a plan of my own. Sunday came faster than I expected. I dressed simply, navy blouse, black slacks, and carried a plain white envelope in my purse. The papers inside were already signed, notarized, and binding. Daniel greeted me at the door with a quick hug. Rachel appeared moments later, her smile perfectly rehearsed. "Margaret, I'm so glad you could make it," she said warmly, taking my coat. The smell of roast chicken filled the air. The table was set neatly, candles flickering at the center. It looked like any other family dinner, but beneath the soft lighting and polite greetings, I could feel the tension. We started with small talk. Rachel asked about my garden. Daniel mentioned a project at work. Lily chatted about school, her small hands fidgeting with a napkin. Everything seemed normal, but I knew what was coming. Halfway through the main course, Rachel leaned forward, her tone shifting just enough to sound intentional. "Margaret, we've been thinking a lot about the future. Stability for Lily, making sure she has a safe home to grow up in." I set down my fork. "That's important," I said, my voice steady. Rachel smiled. "Exactly. We've been under some financial strain lately, and the bank suggested some options. If you could help us secure the house, it would really set things right. Maybe we could go over the paperwork together later." Daniel nodded along, his eyes darting toward me. "It would just make things easier, Mom, for everyone." Inside, my pulse was steady. I could feel the moment tightening, like a string being drawn back. "I see," I said slowly. "You want to make sure Lily has a stable home." "Of course," Rachel replied quickly. "That's all we want, for her future." I reached into my purse. "Well," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I actually brought something for Lily tonight. A little contribution to her future." Rachel's eyes lit up, and I saw the flicker of triumph she tried to hide. I pulled out the envelope, sliding it onto the table in front of Lily. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I know this is a little late, but it's very special." Lily looked at the envelope curiously. "Can I open it, Grandma?" "Of course." She carefully tore it open, pulling out the documents. They were too complicated for her to understand, of course, but the words at the top were clear enough. Transfer of property ownership. Rachel leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What's this?" "It's the house," I said simply. "It now belongs to Lily. It's been placed in trust until she turns 18. Everything's already been filed and approved." For a moment, there was silence. Daniel blinked, as if the words didn't register. Rachel's smile froze, her eyes scanning the page. What do you mean the house belongs to Lily?" she stammered. I said, meeting her gaze, "that this house is now legally hers. You'll still live here, of course, but it's no longer mine, and it's certainly not yours. It's hers." Daniel's face turned pale. "Mom, why would you—" I held up a hand. "Because you wanted security for Lily, didn't you? You said you wanted to make sure she had a safe home." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no polished reply. The air around the table felt charged. Lily looked between us, confused but smiling as she clutched the envelope. "Does this mean I have a house now?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said gently. "It means you always have a place to call home." Daniel sat back, rubbing his forehead. Rachel stared at the documents as if they were a ticking clock. Neither of them had expected this. Inside, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not from anger, but from knowing I had done what was right. I had protected my granddaughter, and I had taken myself out of their games. The rest of dinner passed in uneasy silence. Lily talked happily about her new gift, but Daniel and Rachel barely touched their food. As I left that night, I kissed Lily on the forehead. "Take care of your home, my love." Rachel stood in the doorway, her voice tight. "Margaret, we should talk about this." "We've talked enough," I replied calmly, stepping into the cool night air. Behind me, I could feel their shock, their frustration, the realization that the plan they had quietly built had crumbled in a single evening. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. Lily's arms wrapped around me so tightly it nearly knocked the breath from my chest. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, her voice full of innocence and joy. She didn't understand the full weight of what I had given her. Not yet. But she understood enough to know that I had done something just for her, something that made her feel special and loved. Daniel stood by the dining table, his face pale. Rachel kept glancing between the envelope and me, her expression a storm she was trying hard to hide. Neither of them said much, but their silence spoke volumes. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes. Daniel called more often, short calls just to check in. Rachel's tone softened, though I could feel the effort behind it. One afternoon, Rachel invited me for coffee. We sat on her pristine sofa, mugs in hand. She smiled, a little too carefully. "Margaret, I know things have been tense. I just want us all to get along, for Lily's sake." I met her gaze calmly. "I want that too, but I think it's important we have clear boundaries now. I'll help when I can, but I won't be staying over like before, and I don't want to feel like a guest in my own family's life." Rachel nodded, her smile tight. I could see her weighing my words, deciding how much she could accept. This time, I didn't back down. Lily, meanwhile, was blissfully unaware of the undercurrents. She loved showing me her house, proudly declaring that one day she'd paint her room purple. Her happiness made all the tension worth it. Weeks turned into months. The new dynamic settled slowly. I visited often, but on my terms. No more waiting for last-minute calls. No more taking the smallest room to make others comfortable. When I came over, it was because I chose to, not because I was quietly expected to fill in the gaps. Rachel still made an effort, though sometimes her compliments felt rehearsed. "This soup is amazing, Margaret," she'd say. Or, "Lily always lights up when you visit." I accepted her words without letting my guard down. Daniel seemed more thoughtful now. He didn't push, didn't deflect. Sometimes he would thank me for things he once took for granted. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The biggest change was inside me. I no longer felt like someone staying over in a life that wasn't mine. I had my own space, my own choices, my own voice again. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, I sat on my porch, sipping tea. The flowers in my garden were blooming. Lily's laughter drifted over from the yard where she played. I thought about everything that had happened. From the moment I realized I wasn't invited to her birthday party, to the quiet planning, to that night at the dinner table when everything turned. It would have been easy to act in anger, to confront Daniel and Rachel in a way that burned bridges. But instead, I had chosen something different. I had chosen to protect what mattered without destroying the ties that could still be repaired. It was a lesson I wished I had learned earlier in life. Love is powerful, but it needs boundaries. Without them, even the people closest to you can take more than they should. I smiled to myself. Lily would grow up knowing that love wasn't about letting others diminish you. It was about standing strong while still caring deeply. Rachel came out to the porch, a hesitant smile on her face. "The garden looks beautiful, Margaret." "Thank you," I said. She hesitated, then sat down across from me. "I'm glad you're still part of our lives," she said quietly. "I'll always be part of Lily's life," I replied. The words were deliberate, and I saw her understand what I meant. She nodded, looking away. As the afternoon light shifted, Lily ran up the steps, holding a drawing. "Grandma, I drew our house." I took the paper, my heart warming as I looked at her messy, colorful sketch. The house was bright yellow with flowers in the yard. In the window, 3 stick figures smiled, Lily, her dad, and her mom, and beside them, a smaller figure, me. It wasn't perfect, neither was our family, but in her world, I was still part of the picture, and that was enough.